Every Sunday morning, Tilda made the same trip to the farmer's market on Elgin Street. It was the one part of her week that belonged entirely to her. No deadlines, no conference calls, no careful smiling across a dinner table at a woman who had made it quietly, consistently clear that her son had married the wrong person. That particular Sunday in October, the air was cold the way Ottawa gets in the fall, sharp and clean, carrying the smell of wood smoke from somewhere down the block. Tilda had her wool coat buttoned to the top, a knit hat pulled low, and a scarf wrapped twice around her face against the wind. She was crouching down to look at a basket of late-season squash when she heard her own name spoken aloud by a voice she recognized immediately. She didn't stand up. She didn't move. "You know Noah's wife, right? Tilda?" The woman who answered was someone Tilda had seen at the community center, one of the neighbors her mother-in-law Beverly had known for years. "The one from Sudbury?" "Yes, I've seen her. Beverly was telling me about her last week." The first voice dropped, not low enough. She said the girl barely lifts a finger around the house. Noah comes home from a full day of work, and she's just sitting there on her phone. "That doesn't surprise me," the neighbor said. "Beverly always kept such a beautiful home, and apparently she doesn't contribute to household expenses. Beverly's practically supporting them both. She said she's never once seen that girl offer to pay for groceries." Tilda's hand went still on the squash she'd been holding. She could feel her heartbeat in her ears. A third voice joined in. "I always thought she seemed a bit cold. Too sure of herself, that's exactly what Beverly says. Too independent, doesn't know how to be part of a family." Tilda set the squash down carefully. She stood, adjusted her scarf, and walked in the opposite direction. She did not let herself rush. She was not going to give the farmer's market the satisfaction of seeing her fall apart between the apple crates and the fresh bread. She bought her groceries on the other side of the market, paying for everything in cash, because her hands were too unsteady to manage her phone. The walk home took 12 minutes. She counted them. She had been doing this since she was a child, counting things when her emotions got ahead of her. 12 minutes. 48 steps up Beaumont to the corner. 6 houses from the corner to the one she now shared with Noah and his parents while they saved for a place of their own. They had been clear about the arrangement from the beginning, when Noah's company had restructured and his salary had taken a hit. Beverly and Tilda's father-in-law Cormac had offered them the basement suite at no cost. The plan was 18 months. They were at month 11. 11 months of cooking dinner 4 nights a week. 11 months of paying the hydro bill and the internet and the groceries without ever being asked, because it felt like the right thing to do, and because she genuinely respected Cormac and genuinely wanted Beverly to like her. 11 months of coming home from a job Beverly had never once asked her about, changing out of her work clothes and putting a meal on the table while Beverly watched the 6 o'clock news. The anger didn't hit her all at once. It came in slowly, the way cold does when you've been outside too long and haven't noticed. By the time she got home, set the bags down on the kitchen counter, and stood looking at the window above the sink, she had made a decision. She was not going to confront Beverly directly. She had thought about it for the entire walk home, and she knew exactly how that conversation would go. Beverly would deny everything, then find a way to reframe the story so that Tilda had somehow started it, and Tilda would end up looking like the difficult one for bringing it up at all. What she needed was something Beverly couldn't reframe. She needed a witness Beverly would feel. She thought about it for the rest of the afternoon. Noah knew something was wrong. He always did. But every time he asked, she said she was fine and gave him enough of a smile to buy herself a few more hours. By the time she had the whole plan worked out, she was calm enough to sit through dinner without Beverly noticing a thing. 2 days later, Tilda called her cousin Petra, not the Petra in Noah's family circle, but her own cousin Petra from Hamilton, who had the kind of personality that fills a room before the person has even taken off their coat. Tilda explained everything, and Petra laughed for a full 30 seconds before saying, "Tell me what you need." That Thursday evening, Noah mentioned to Beverly and Cormac at dinner that he'd reconnected with an old colleague, a woman he'd worked with briefly at his previous firm, very successful, great family. He'd run into her at a work event. They'd talked, gotten along well, and he'd invited her to come to the house that Saturday for lunch. Beverly looked up immediately. "What kind of colleague?" Noah kept his voice easy. "She's in financial consulting now. Her family's from Toronto originally, but they've been in Vancouver for years. Very established." Beverly's entire posture changed, just slightly, just enough. "That's nice," she said. "What's her name, Petra?" Noah said. Beverly nodded and returned to her food, but Tilda, watching from across the table, could see her already calculating. By Friday evening, Beverly had rearranged the living room furniture, bought good coffee from the cafe on Bank Street, and asked Tilda if the tablecloth she was planning to use was presentable enough. Tilda said it was lovely. She said it with a straight face. Petra arrived on Saturday in a cashmere coat, the color of cream, her hair done like she'd stepped off a flight from somewhere that had better weather than Ontario, carrying a bottle of wine that Tilda knew had cost about $22, but looked expensive in the right hands. She greeted Beverly and Cormac with exactly the kind of warmth that money and confidence produce when they're combined correctly. Not fawning, not formal, but the particular ease of someone who has never once doubted that she belongs in any room she walks into. Beverly was charmed before the coats were off. They sat in the living room while Tilda brought out tea. Petra told a story about a restaurant in Montreal she'd been to last month, and Beverly laughed at the right moment, and Cormac asked a question about the financial sector, and everything moved along beautifully. Then Petra set down her cup and said, still smiling, "Noah, I've been meaning to ask you, how is the job search going? I heard things got a bit difficult at your last firm." Noah blinked. "It's going well, actually, taking some time to find the right fit." Petra tilted her head, sympathetic. Of course. It must be a relief to have the family support system while you're getting back on your feet." She glanced at Beverly. "Though I imagine it's a lot for you as well, Beverly, having them here while they sort things out." Beverly looked, for a fraction of a second, like she wasn't sure which direction she was supposed to feel. "Oh, it's no trouble at all. That's so generous," Petra said warmly. She turned back to Noah. "You know, I actually know a few people who might be good connections. I'd hate for Tilda to have to keep carrying things on her own." There was a pause that lasted half a second longer than a pause should. Beverly said, "What do you mean, carrying things on her own?" Petra looked genuinely puzzled. "Well, she's been covering most of the household expenses, hasn't she? The bills, the groceries. She mentioned it when we caught up last month. I just thought, with Noah's transition, it must be a stretch." Beverly turned to look at Tilda. Tilda was looking at her tea. Petra, bless her, simply kept going. "She never complains about it. That's what I admire about her. Works those hours and still comes home and gets dinner on the table. I don't know how she does it, honestly." She smiled at Beverly. "You must be so glad Noah found someone with her work ethic." The conversation moved on. Petra redirected it beautifully, asking Cormac about a home renovation project she'd noticed by the front door, and the moment passed the way moments do when they're left without oxygen. But Tilda could see, in the careful way Beverly held the handle of her teacup, that something had shifted. After lunch, which Tilda had prepared and Beverly had accepted graciously and without comment, Petra said her goodbyes, hugged Tilda a moment too long and left. The house settled back into its usual Saturday quiet. Beverly went to the kitchen to wash up. Tilda followed to help, and they stood side by side at the sink for a few minutes without speaking. Then Beverly said very quietly, "You pay the hydro bill? And the internet," Tilda said. "And I do the grocery run most weeks. We wanted to contribute while we're staying here." Beverly was quiet for another long moment. "I didn't know that," she said. Tilda didn't say anything. She didn't need to. It took another week before Beverly said anything else on the subject. They were sitting in the kitchen one morning, Beverly having coffee and Tilda about to leave for work, when Beverly looked up from her mug and said, "I think I owe you an apology." Tilda set down her bag. "I've said things," Beverly said, in the careful way of someone who is not entirely comfortable with admitting things out loud, "that weren't fair. To people in the neighborhood. Things I shouldn't have said." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "I think I was angry about the situation, and I took it out on you, which wasn't right." "I appreciate you saying that," Tilda said. She meant it. Beverly nodded. She looked tired in the way that people look when they've been carrying something that they've finally set down. "That friend of Noah's, Petra, my cousin actually." Beverly looked at her. "Your cousin?" "Yes." There was a long pause. Then, to Tilda's genuine surprise, Beverly let out a short, sharp laugh. "God," she said, "you're smarter than I gave you credit for." Tilda picked up her bag. "I'll see you tonight, Beverly." "I'll have dinner started," Beverly said. It was the first time she had ever said that. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. They never are. Beverly was not suddenly a different person. She was still sharp-tongued, still quick to have an opinion, still not entirely comfortable with the fact that her son had married someone who didn't ask permission before forming a thought. But the cruelty went out of it. The whispering stopped, as far as Tilda could tell. Cormac, who had watched most of this from the comfortable distance of a man who prefers not to be involved, began making small, deliberate gestures. Asking Tilda about her work, laughing at her jokes, once driving 40 minutes out of his way to pick up a specific kind of olive oil she'd mentioned in passing. He never explained why. He didn't need to. Noah found out the whole story eventually, when Tilda and Petra sat together at the kitchen table after Christmas dinner, and Petra, on her second glass of wine, couldn't stop laughing long enough to keep the secret. He sat very still for a moment, then looked at his wife, with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Somewhere between admiration and the particular humility of someone who realizes, not for the first time, that the person they married is considerably more capable than they'd fully appreciated. "You staged the whole thing," he said. "I didn't stage anything," Tilda said. "Petra was just being honest." Petra raised her glass. "I was extremely honest." She could have denied it, Tilda said. "Beverly." She could have pushed back. She chose not to. Noah shook his head slowly. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I should have handled this myself. Months ago. I'm sorry. You're handling the mortgage deposit," Tilda said. "That counts." The house they found was on a quiet street in Nepean, a red brick semi with a porch that faced south and a backyard big enough to matter. They got the keys in February, which meant moving boxes through freezing rain, which meant Cormac showed up on moving day with his truck, and two neighbors Tilda had never met, all of whom worked without being asked and stayed for takeout pizza afterward. Beverly didn't come that day. She sent a houseplant instead, a large fiddle-leaf fig with a note that said in her brisk handwriting, "For your kitchen, it needs good light. Beverly." Tilda put it in the south-facing window. It did very well there. They had Beverly and Cormac for dinner the following month, the first time as hosts in their own home. Tilda made her grandmother's roast chicken with root vegetables, and Cormac ate 2 full portions, and Beverly admired the kitchen in the careful way of someone who is paying a genuine compliment while also assessing the cabinet hardware. She said very little about the decor, except that the fiddle-leaf fig looked healthy, which was the closest she came to saying she was glad Tilda had kept it. After dinner, while the men were doing the dishes, something Noah had apparently trained for in advance, Beverly and Tilda sat at the kitchen table with their wine, and there was a quiet between them that was different from all the other quiets. Less loaded. Less like the silence before something. "I was wrong about you," Beverly said at last. Tilda turned her glass on the table. "When Noah first brought you home, I had an idea of what I thought he needed. And you didn't fit it, so I decided you were wrong instead of deciding I was." Beverly paused. "I've been thinking about that." "You don't need to keep apologizing," Tilda said. "I'm not apologizing," Beverly said. "I'm explaining. There's a difference." She looked at Tilda directly in the way she rarely did. "You could have made my life very difficult. That wasn't what I wanted. I know that now." Beverly was quiet for a moment. "I didn't know it then." Tilda refilled both their glasses. The sound of Noah and Cormac arguing cheerfully about the right way to load a dishwasher drifted through from the kitchen, and the fiddle-leaf fig stood in the window, catching the last of the evening light, and the dinner was done, and the house was theirs, and that was enough.